Welcome back to the vIQtory podcast. I'm your host, Steve McGrath, and in this episode, I'm pleased to bring you my conversation with Andy McCollum. Now, Andy was just another undrafted rookie free agent, and he decided to go back to Toledo to be a grad assistant. He got a chance to play in arena football, and it took one break, a chance to work out with the Cleveland Browns that sparked a 15-year NFL career. So Andy actually played most of his career between the Rams and the Saints, and with the Rams, he won a Super Bowl, and he made it to another one, which unfortunately he lost to when he played the Patriots. But an incredible career. And Andy took the time to tell his entire story, including what he's done afterwards, being a financial advisor since retiring from the league. Now, before we get into his story, I need to remind you all that we're brought to you by Team Builder. And Team Builder works with over 500 high school football programs nationwide, as well as colleges and the NFL. So if you're looking for more information about putting together a weightlifting program, anything close to that at all, go to their website, use the promo code VIQTORY, and you know that's VIQTORY. But now, here's Andy. I am pleased to be joined right now by Andy McCollum. Andy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking the time. No, of course, to be able to have a conversation with someone that's played 15 years in the NFL, you started like everyone else. You were just a young kid. So, Andy, I wanted to jump this off with what it was like for you in high school. You know, I have that you were growing up in Ohio. Uh,
Right.
what did you? At what point did you start playing football? And of course, this is the late '80s, getting into the '90s, where you eventually make it to Toledo. But what was your background playing sports growing up? At what point did you really start to take football seriously?
Let's see. But yeah, I was like any kid that growing up playing every sport they had to offer. You start off playing soccer and basketball, and I found I wasn't that good at basketball, so ended up uh, ended up on a wrestling mat in the winter seasons. But football began as most communities in late elementary school, middle school. Started out on those youth programs. Enjoyed it. Just I had an older brother, so I followed him, and he was pretty good. So I always just wanted to, be able to beat him someday. But you know, so yeah, just progressed through there, and it wasn't until high school that it started becoming really fun as you get better and better at it. And then I got some looks from college teams, and it just went from there.
So ultimately, how does that road look like for you to get to Toledo? Were you really considering other schools? Was it until your senior year where you kind of had to narrow this down?
Yeah, it was. Well, I was learning. My son's a senior in high school now, and it's a lot different from what I remember, um, as far as the recruiting and all that stuff. But I just remember a handful of schools, mostly the MAC schools in that area, the Ohio, Indiana, Illinois area that were interested, and I took a couple visits and just ended up going to Toledo. They obviously advantage there. They offered me a scholarship, so I tried to take advantage of that.
Uh, Now, do you recall what it was like adjusting, just the pace of game, the size of the guys around you? Was it a big jump for you to go from high school to college, or did you find that that was relatively easy?
Well, no, it wasn't easy, but I um, see, I was always an undersized guy for a lineman. Nowadays, I don't think I'd even get a chance as big as these guys are now. So I had to battle hard to keep some weight on and build up, in the weight room and whatnot. I was fortunate enough to be able, when I got to Toledo, I actually had a red shirt season, so that was actually helpful. I got some practice time, but didn't get to play, which was, wasn't real fun. But it gave me a chance to develop more physically and put some weight on and be able to compete with the older guys that the size on the field that I wasn't used to.
Yeah, right. Uh, so by the time you get to what will ultimately be your fifth year on campus at Toledo, were you seriously thinking that the NFL was a possibility? I mean, it seems like mostly because it's a different era too. I mean, today I feel like kids are so inundated with different people in their ears or social media telling them that they have it. What was it like for you, just going back to the early '90s, trying to navigate that space?
Yeah, it was a little bit different back then, like you mentioned there, but it was different for me too because I wasn't drafted. I wasn't. I wasn't even invited to the combine. That stuff's all on TV nowadays. You can see everybody who's there and everything they're doing. And that's fun to watch. But I was never even invited there, which just irritated the crap out of me at the time. But um, uh, again, I was kind of undersized, trying to build up and make it, and I didn't get. Um, I felt I just wanted a shot. Give me one shot at camp. If I can make the team, fine. If not, I'll go find something else to do. So my once I graduated, I didn't get a shot that season. I went back to Toledo. I was graduate assistant coach for that season, that off season, or that season in the fall, and then that following spring, I got a chance to go play with an arena football team, the Milwaukee Mustangs. I was only up there for a couple of weeks, and then I got my break, and I got a chance to go to camp with the Cleveland Browns. And I think it was only because I knew somebody. We had a coach at Toledo who was the offensive line coach for a couple of years there, Ellis Rainsberger, and he had become a scout over there with Cleveland in the meantime, and they had somebody. They had a kid that they drafted this year. I remember his name. They had drafted a big old guard from Hawaii, this Hawaiian kid, and they brought him out to mini camp, and then he decided he didn't want to play, he quit. So they had a spot, and that was back when they invited 100, close to 100 plus guys to camp. They don't do that anymore, and so I got a call and said, that you come in here and give it a shot. I went for a tryout, and they gave me a shot. I ended up making it on the practice squad there for that would have been my rookie year, that first half of that season. So that was my break, getting that shot in to get a look at camp. So just to have somebody get a look at you is tough. It's going to be harder to do nowadays with the less people they bring in now and the rules they have as far as practice. I'm looking at some of that stuff and thinking, man, I don't know if I'd be making a team nowadays. So it's a lot different.
Yeah, I do just want to focus on that time where you go back to Toledo to be that, go for that graduate, part coach type of role. You do that through a season. You start playing any opportunity. So you go to the Arena Football League, and then for you to just hold on faith with the Browns, you finally get that break. But then, like you said, there's 100 guys that get invited. So the longest of long odds for, just call it like a 1 year span of your life. Were you what was your confidence like in just your mental thought process during that time? Did you consider any other route? Was it just going to be that? I mean, can you just walk us through what that was?
Well, like I said, I had my degree, and again, I was always interested in coaching, and that was pretty much my backup plan. But like I said, I wanted to get a shot, and if I had a shot, and they said no, you can't do it, then okay. But I just wanted to have a shot, and I think I was able to prove that I was able to do it once they get to those preseason games, and nowadays it's even harder to get those reps in those preseason games. But like I said, those younger guys and the guys in the bottom of the depth chart back then, when they had 95 to 100 players coming to camp, we didn't get much shots until the second half of those preseason games. Right. And so I remember if I finally got into some of those games back at the old Cleveland Browns Stadium, and I grew up going to some of those Browns games too at the Cleveland Stadium, so that's pretty cool. That thing's been gone for a while now, but I'll never forget some of those. But yeah, I got a shot to go against some of those guys that I saw at the combine, and guys that did get drafted, and so I was determined to be able to show that I could compete against those guys, and it worked out.
Oh yeah, so straight from Cleveland, I'd imagine off of their practice squad, that's where the Saints find you and sign you.
Correct. They were able. Let's see. I think the NFL rules are the same now. If you sign somebody off of someone else's practice squad, you just have to put them on your active roster. So they gave me an opportunity to come down there, and they said, "Yeah, we got a shot. You got a shot to play down here." And at the time, Cleveland told me that we want to keep you. We'll put you on active roster if you stay here. And of course, that was my hometown, and I thought, okay, but they also told me, we see you as a backup for several years. And I said, you know what, I want a chance to play. So I took the chance, went down to New Orleans, and ended up staying there for the next 5 seasons, I guess it was, and it's a great place to play down there. It's a lot of fun, and did a lot of good fishing down there too. So
Now, and you start right off the bat when you get there. I mean, from what I could pull up, I mean, you started 9 games that first season. So, I mean, they obviously needed you, and you earned, your playing time just based off of what you did in the years since then. But when you were in New Orleans, to make that just another big jump from practice squad guy to now starting in NFL games, confidence level, I mean, what did you do to just sort of gear yourself up both mentally and physically to now be playing at the pinnacle? Because it just feels like it, it went fast forward, right? I mean,
yeah,
all this time, I mean, you're kind of waiting for your shot, and then boom, everything clicks, and here you are. You're on the field, the lights are on.
yeah. Excuse me. Well, one of the things they had back then too, and I would participate in was the World League of football. So I got down there at the second half of that season. I guess that would have been 94, 95. Um, yeah, 95 season. And so that following spring, I actually went and played in the World League in Barcelona. And back then they had maybe 6 World League teams, and they would allocate young guys like myself from each NFL team would allocate a couple players to each of these teams just to get some experience and whatnot. And that was that was a lot of fun. Again, playing against not just college guys, but outstanding college guys who were trying to make it in the NFL and whatnot. And that was a great experience too. So that got a little experience, I guess. But it was also ended up being you know took up pretty much all of the off season. So there's no off season for the guys who did that. They went straight into another season, and it was a lot of work, but it was well worth it.
Gotcha. Yeah, and the NFL would never let that fly today.
Yeah, you're right. You're right about that.
But in your first couple of years in New Orleans, I mean, I think immediately you fill in right guard, then you move to center, and then you spend some time at left guard. We actually, I had skipped over this. What were you originally playing at Toledo, and how much of an adjustment was it for you to be playing, all parts of the interior line?
I played most of my college career I spent playing guard. Just that offense, we had a lot of pulling and pulling outside with the guards and whatnot. I played a little bit of center when some guys got hurt. I think part of um, the reason why I was able to make it and get my foot in the door was being able to do both, being able to do both sides of guard and center, anything inside there. Just that versatility makes you a little more valuable. They don't have to keep 2 guys; they can keep one. If you can back up and play this guy, and you can start at left guard and still be the backup center. I did that for a long time, and once I got to really spend some time at center, I really enjoyed that the most, and I think that was my best. That's where I played my best ball, being the center. But like I said, the more you can do in there, you got to be versatile to make it. So
Absolutely. So just looking at your New Orleans time as a whole, I mean, the team on the field that did not have, as many wins as, say your Rams, teams did later on. But that aside, in terms of the locker room and even what, coaches, Dick brought to the table, or even Jim Mora, and not to look over Mr. Ventura either, but what was it about just those coaches and your early NFL experience? What did you see about styles that would work, how to, just traits, and even not to mention Willie Roaf, to be playing on the same line as one of the best to ever do it either? What did you see about the guys that were able to do their job at the highest level? What were their sort of, I call it fingerprints of success. Like, what were they doing that was in allowing them to get to that level?
yeah, through all that, and even further on through every year of my career anyway, when you learn from different guys and different coaches. You mentioned a couple names down there. Um, yeah, I mean, you'd be able to pick and choose things that you'd want to carry with you from everybody who you're playing with and playing for. You mentioned a guy like Willie Roaf. Now that guy, him and maybe Orlando Pace and those guys like that I played with who are in a different class where they're just physically gifted that they can just show up and dominate. Now, playing with those guys and practicing those guys and seeing them, and they're still working their butts off every day. But I realized I'm not in that situation. I need to put in a lot more. I need to put in a lot more time because I don't have the physical gifts of a Willie Roaf or Orlando Pace. So that kind of thing helped motivate me to work that much harder in the off season, stay in the weight room, and as a center as well, you got to make sure the game and what the coaches are looking for and what kind of calls you want um, your linemen to make. That center's out there making the calls for all the line and making sure everybody's on the same page. And I really enjoyed that part of it as well. And the more you do that, the better it gets, and the funner it becomes. I remember that second Super Bowl we lost to the Patriots, but through the season you're watching pretty much every game that your opponent played, especially if you get to the Super Bowl. And I remember watching probably every game, every play of every game they played during that season, and then come second half of that game, they're pulling stuff that I've never seen, right? So I'm really enjoying it. I'm like, okay, I can come up with a way to block this, and you make some calls and adjust, and that's always fun to do. It didn't turn out real good that day, but that kind of thing I enjoyed.
Oh yeah, the mental chess piece of it.
Yeah.
Now, since you brought up that game in particular, I mean, do you feel any sort of way about Bill Belichick in the Patriots dynasty in terms of what he was able to do X's and O's and confuse teams, as he's shown for 20 years that he's been able to do it, but also the cheating allegations at multiple different points, and I believe even there was something to do with your Super Bowl instance with them
Yeah.
too. Do you have any
Yeah,
thoughts
there
on
was.
that?
I I have a lot of respect for him and his staff, and he was a coach there in Cleveland when I
Right.
was
Oh yeah.
there on practice squad. So I knew a little bit about him, and a lot of his staff were the same guys. But you're right, that Super Bowl that they beat us in was kind of tainted with that cheating allegation, and I guess they had come in and they found the film, and they fined them for it as well. So they did do it, but they came in and I guess they videoed our practices on Saturday before the game, where we were in
That's gotta hurt.
the stadium. And I remember some of the guys, especially Marshall, was complaining on the field. He's like, these guys are calling our plays before we're running it and stuff. And at the time I was just so into doing what I wanted, what I was trying to do, and okay, let's just get it done. Let's just go do it. And we still almost pulled it off anyway. But you got to give them credit; they had a good plan. But that that cheating thing will probably stick with them forever, especially because they keep doing it. They keep getting caught about different ways of doing it, and so that's always going to be a little controversy surrounding those teams. That you can't take away the fact they got great teams, though. I mean, so.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But anyway, to a slightly happier time, when you did win a Super Bowl, I did want to just ask about those two teams. I know that there was kind of a letdown year in between the two of them, but different head coach, of course, going from Coach Vermeil to Coach Martz. Offensive firepower, though, pretty much the same. What was the difference, coaching aside, between those two teams? Obviously, one won and one didn't, but I mean, was it really the same thing, or did philosophically anything sort of change in the locker room to get back there?
No, it was a very similar team. I mean, I don't know how many guys were not on that roster that were on that second roster. I don't know. I'm not sure, but it seemed, looking back, it seems like the core group was the same. Probably some different guys here and there, but I think the coaching philosophy is very similar. I think Marsh did a good job just to continue what Vermeil had begun and got us to the Super Bowl. There's obviously some little differences, and but again, I think they both were excellent coaches, and they obviously each had a different style somewhat, but I think they both did a good job.
Gotcha. No, Honestly, does Kurt Warner belong in the Hall of Fame?
Oh yeah, of course.
Right.
Of course he does. Yeah, I
Uh,
think so. Yeah.
and I do, say that of course in jest, but he goes down, after a bad start, and then Mark Bulger that era begins very quickly, and without much fanfare. Kurt Warner sort of gets left behind, and then the Coach Linehan regime comes in, and I just want to get your thoughts about how that your time in St. Louis ended, because that short run that you had toward the beginning, as Kurt Warner goes away, the Torrey Holtz, Isaac Bruce's, Asa Keems, everyone, eventually moves on or retires. Why? And of course, talent does leave or in age, but philosophically, how much of a change when Coach Linehan came in? Why was he unable to sort of ride the wave that had been built? Was it just talent leaving, or, I mean, could you put your finger on anything?
No, I think it's more than just one thing. I don't know. I mean, he had a different, way of doing things. I know that was, I think that's his first head coaching job too. So I'm sure he learned a lot of things that, he didn't know before. But everybody does a little different. And one thing, going back to what you asked me earlier, one thing I'd learned, throughout the league, and that kind of demonstrated it throughout my time in the league, um, was that you talked about Kurt. He gets hurt, right? He gets hurt, and now Mark comes in and he does a great job. And I realize that they're always looking to replace you. No matter how good you are, the the scouts and the front office people always assume that there's a better guy out there. Okay, especially in my situation where I wasn't drafted, and you're not the number one pick or something. So they're always thinking there's a better guy out there. So and I saw it time after time. A guy gets hurt, guy comes in, he shows he can do the job. Either he shows that he can do the job better, or he can go shows that he can do the job, and you only got to pay him as much, right? So now the other guy is not quite as valuable, and someone else might pick him up. So all that transitioning through the NFL and through free agency happens. Um, a lot of it is just the office people think and that they can find a better guy, and then usually it ends up they can, because eventually guys get older and guys get hurt, and it happened to me at the end of my career. I got hurt. I was fortunate enough to play for a long time without major injuries, and I was able to play every game for a 5 or 6 year span there and not miss a single snap. So I was really blessed in that regard. But once I got hurt, it's a different deal. They'll find somebody to replace you, because that's just how it works. So
Yeah, very
yeah,
cutthroat.
yeah.
One thing you mentioned there, free agency, both that decision to come over to the Rams and also at the end of your career, two completely different parts of your career, though. One where you actually have an opportunity when you're younger, you're only going to get better, and teams see a long career ahead of you. Whereas at the very end, it's someone just, is anyone interested? I'm coming off an injury. Is anyone looking for a veteran presence rather? Both times, what mattered most to you when you were looking to see what the next step in your career would be?
Um, just whatever opportunities were there, you'd have to compare. A couple times when I was here with the Rams, I came up as a free agent, and I was able to go visit a couple places. I remember at one point, um, in fact, at one point I visited out with the Patriots, and Belichick, offered me about the similar deal that I had here on the table in St. Louis, and I decided to stay here in St. Louis. Um, Part of that, part of all those decisions come into, what city you're going to, where you're comfortable staying. Do I want to go live on the East Coast, or do I want to stay here where, my Midwest roots are, similar to where I grew up. So things like that. And at the time, do you want to uproot your family too? Because, at certain points in time, I have some kids and they're in school. And, so all those factors come into play, depending on what opportunities present themselves. So just like any, I guess it would be just like any career with
Sure.
opportunities to go and move and up, promote, you know, climb the
Gotcha.
ladder. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So, ultimately, though, as we've said now, you do go to Detroit for that one last year. And after that, what went through your mind in terms of, do I want to hang it up or not? Because you pursued that extra contract to go, and you did decide, even if it's not a cross country move, a decent size move to get all the way over to Detroit. What were you thinking at the end of that year, and ultimately just went into your decision to ultimately hang it up?
Yeah, well, they called late in training camp, so I didn't have to go through the beatdown of training camp, but which was nice. But I thought it was an opportunity, and we just move for a few months and then come back. I knew it was a 1 year deal. They needed some veteran offensive linemen, so it worked out pretty well. I kind of realized that going into that it would probably be my last year, and it would probably be smart to do it that way. Just how my knees were feeling and how much to me it was like really came home to me, like, because before every practice I realized, holy crap, I need an extra half an hour just to stretch here, just to get warmed up and make sure I'm ready to go. Things like that told me, like, okay, yeah, I don't have much time of this left, so I just wanted to be able to, when I'm this age now, 50, maybe even 10 years from now, I'm, going on 60. I want to be able to walk and get around, and you see a bunch of the old retired guys, and a lot of them have struggles doing that kind of thing. So I didn't want to push it too far. I may have anyway, but we'll
I,
see.
I mean, how many guys make it 15 years? I mean, that is such a ridiculous run in the NFL. I mean, the fact that you did it and you only really had that injury toward the end, and the fact that just looking at, you look like you're in great shape. I mean, how good did it feel to drop all that excess weight
Yeah,
that I'm sure you battled your
that
entire
helps.
career to keep on?
Yeah, that helped a little bit for the first few years after I didn't do much, and I kind of stayed at that weight, and then I realized, I'd probably feel a lot better if I dropped some of this. I didn't need it anymore, and just started working out a little bit again and got rid of it. So it definitely helps. It makes the knees feel better.
Now, of course, you've been retired for quite some time, so I did want to get into you. It looked like you took a couple years to sort of decide what that next step is, and we know today that you've gone into the financial advising realm. If I have this right, it's Resource One Advisors. What went into the decision to go into financial planning, and how much have you found that just your sports background, the skill sets that you developed, how did that translate over into any other walk of life?
Yeah. Well, for me, um, it was a it was a an acquaintance that I had through our church, and a guy named John Brooks who who has become my mentor since that time. And he approached me, and I knew him from different small group meetings and stuff at church. And he approached me and said, you retired. What are you gonna do now? And and I said, I don't know. I don't want to do that though. Leave me alone. So, but eventually learning more about it and how it works, and the different approach that we kind of take to it here. It's more of a team approach, because I had an advisor when I was playing, and he did a good job, but he was a one guy doing his own thing, right? So we do it a little different here, which really appealed to me, coming from obviously the team background that I'd been through for so long. And we kind of use a team approach with multiple guys in different roles, for so every client has more than just one advisor. And that kind of appealed to me. And after seeing um, a lot of guys in the league too, that they made a ton of money, and they were only there for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden they're broke, or if and then I read some statistics, like real high percentage of guys who played in the league, they end up bankrupt. And so those kind of things, being able to help people just plan and save and be smart with their money, kind of appealed to me. And like I said, the team approach here that we use was real appealing to me too.
That's awesome. And I also don't want to make sure I don't forget, you've actively worked as being a coach too, because you help shepherd your sons through navigating sports through their younger years. So you've been involved in Eureka with both the little league, the midget football program, as well as the high school.
Yes. I'm still working with the junior Wildcat program. In fact, this fall, I'll be coaching it'll be the sixth grade team. My youngest son will be a sixth grader this fall. Um, and I coach the offensive line up at the high school as well. So they got a real great program out here. It's a lot of fun. It's always fun to watch kids develop, and being involved in both the youth and the high school program is great because now you can see kids develop from that we can start them as early as third and fourth grade and then watch them develop all the way through. Like my son's class now, he's a senior this year, and I've coached him since third grade. So we've watched them for all those years develop. All these kids, you get to know them, you get to know their families, and you get to see them develop and grow into a bunch of outstanding young men. And it's really enjoyable.
That's awesome. Now, I do like to end on a little thing I call the gauntlet, a couple quick hitter questions I have for you.
Okay.
But one last question before I jump into it, and that is 15-year career, you were healthy for the vast majority of your career, starting so many games in a row. Were you ever like, what does it take to get a Pro Bowl nomination? Does it ever run through your head? Like, am I not getting the attention that I should be getting considering I'm on a good team and I do very well?
Yeah, it definitely ran through my head a few times, especially when we were doing so well. And like you said, I was playing for a long period of time. Um, I think I came close a couple times. I know I got named to like the All Madden team and stuff like that, so that was pretty cool for me because you grew up watching and playing the Madden thing. But you're right, I never did get the Pro Bowl, and it was a goal of mine that I didn't achieve. But it was kind of out of my control. I think a lot of it has to
Sure.
do with again, where you're drafted, and people look at how much your contracts are worth and stuff like that. So people look at those things and say, oh, this is an undrafted guy. So I think that might hurt me in those things, but it is what it is, and the Lord blessed me in so many ways through that career, so I can't complain.
In the NFL is also a marketing machine too, so they kind of
Oh,
pick the guys that they want to sort of have out there. So definitely don't think it was all in your control.
yeah.
But all right, Andy, I have what I call the gauntlet. So I need to ask you, what is most important? Is it having the number one offense or the number one defense?
For a team, probably the number one defense, because as much as I love offense, I played offense my whole career, but the old saying is still true: defense wins championships. I believe that. Yeah.
Now, what would you say is your greatest football memory?
Greatest football memory. I'll tell you what. I have more memories now and better ones, and maybe just because they're more recent, but for coaching and some of these kids, and like I mentioned earlier, watching some of these guys that I've coached with my son's teams, progress from fourth grader who can barely walk and chew gum at the same time, and now these kids are getting recruited by colleges. So those are some of my favorite memories, just watching kids develop and grow like that.
That's awesome. Now, did you have a pregame ritual that you stuck to?
Not really. I know a lot of guys had got really superstitious about it, and I kind of went the other way. I'm like, I'm going to make sure I don't get superstitious about anything. So I kind of made sure I did everything a little bit different all the time, but it kind of ended up being that way anyway. But no, nothing real funny or weird about the pregame stuff. I did enjoy, especially when we were on the road, going out because we'd always have the centers come out early, do some snaps with the quarterbacks and stuff like that. And all the crazy fans get there early, especially when you're on the road, and they always have some good comments to throw at you. They're trying to harass the other players. And I enjoyed, because some of them are pretty funny.
So your clients don't have to worry about you putting on your lucky socks before the big meeting or anything like that?
No, nothing like that. Yeah.
Now, what's most important? Is it the players or is it the scheme?
It's the players, absolutely. Absolutely. I've learned that coaching. I know tons of guys have a big fat playbook. Mine, you can fit my playbook on one page. If you have a player, you just give them the ball and see what happens, right? So if you just put them in the right spot, make it simple, make it what they can remember, and let them win the game. I've always said that coaches can lose games. They can't really win games. They can put players in the position to win games, but they don't really win games. Coaches can definitely lose a game though, so that makes it a little more pressure for the coach. But yeah, I'd go with the players.
Got it. Now, last one, and I think it's most important. What is the best piece of advice? And I'm sure you've done this hundreds and hundreds of times by now with the kids that you're coaching. But what's the best piece of advice that you would give to a young athlete that sees the long NFL career that you've had, the success that you've had after it, and wants to get the best piece of advice to have that level of success in their life?
Um, well, I would say, other than just perseverance, right? Keeping after it, don't quit, that kind of thing. I would say the one thing I learned, I do want to mention for later, um, is I kind of struggled with it. I know a lot of guys do in the NFL and even in college ball, having your identity wrapped up in being a football player or being a basketball player, being whatever it is that your passion is. It did take me a while to figure out that's not who I am. That's just what I do. So I would um, give that advice to everyone. It's not who you are. It's just what you do, and make sure your identity and who you are is a little bit bigger than that. I like to say now I find my identity as a believer and a follower of Jesus, um, as opposed to just being a football player, right? Because that doesn't last. It's not going to be there forever, and it could be real short, right? I was very fortunate that was a long time, but most guys only get there a year or two at the most. So that would be the advice I would give to younger guys, and do
Got
try.
it. No, and very wise words. Well, Andy, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for talking to me. I had a good time. Thanks.